Do you remember a time in your life when your parents would tell you stories? Like maybe they would read a story from a book or tell you a tale that had been passed down through the generations. Well, since my two daughters were little bitty, I've been telling them stories at bedtime. It's been a fun way to help them wind down a little bit and also helps me connect with them. Well, for the first several years of story time, I would ask them to help me tell the story by them giving me a couple of characters to build the story around. Now, these characters could be any person, place, or thing. Now, what I began to realize is that the characters they would suggest revealed a lot about where they were in life and what they were interested in at the time. For example, when they were 2 or 3 years old, they would suggest simple characters like two sisters or a girl and a doll. And then as they got a bit older and their imaginations began to flourish, the characters became more magical, like a unicorn and a mermaid, a ladybug and a grasshopper, a cloud and a gust of wind. And that's when my ability to tell stories was really stretched. And now that my oldest daughter is close to adolescence, she's suggesting more complex characters like two friends who have a crush on the same boy. And let's just say that I usually end these types of stories with the daddy of these little girls taking them on a special trip for froyo and a chastity belt. Or at least that's how I'd like to end the story. Regardless of what characters are featured in the story, I always find a way to conclude the story with some sort of moral to be taught, whether that be sharing or forgiveness, loving people that look different than them. And oftentimes the lesson sticks because it's tied to a story. That's what stories do. They make learning a lesson a little bit easier. They stick with us, which is why Jesus told stories all the time. His stories were called parables, which basically just means a story that has a spiritual point or a lesson behind it. And for the next couple of weeks, we're going to look at some parables that came from the great storyteller. Stories that meant something to the original audience and have a lot to say to us too. The story we're going to look at today is actually the third installment in a trilogy of stories that Jesus told. And each of these 3 stories were anchored to the central idea of something being lost and then being found. You may even call it the Lost and Found trilogy. In the first episode of this series, Jesus told the story of a shepherd who lost one of his sheep and then went to look for it. He then told a quick story about a woman who lost a coin and swept her whole house to find it. He finished by telling the headline story, which was about a man and his 2 sons. It started like this. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me the share of the estate." So he divided the property between them. So basically, a son told his father, "Dad, I know you're going to leave me some stuff when you die, but instead of waiting for that to happen, can you just go ahead and give it to me right now?" And for some reason, the dad agrees. So the son took his inheritance and went off to a faraway land and squandered all his wealth in wild living. In essence, this young man went from rich to broke, from full to famished, from a son to a servant, who was so desperate that he hired himself out to a pig farmer who sent him to the fields to feed pigs. You might say that the young man had hit rock bottom and then came to his senses. He understood that his father's servants lived way better than him, so he decided to go back home and make a deal with his dad. He didn't expect to get his old status back, and for all to be forgiven, he just wanted a warm bed and a good meal, and he would work for his father as an employee to get it. If you were in the audience when Jesus told this story, you probably had an idea of how this was going to go. And the dad would give the son a long lecture, show him a little mercy, and give him a job as a servant. And this would have been a good ending, because the son didn't even deserve that. But that's not what happened. Jesus told the story this way. But while he, the younger son, was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. So as soon as his son came into view, the father wasted no time running up to him. The son didn't even have a chance to say anything yet. The dad, without hearing a word, hugged his son and kissed him. He then clothed him with a robe and placed a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And if that wasn't enough, he threw a huge party to celebrate the return of his son. The son expected to be treated like a servant, but the dad wasn't interested in that. He had his son back. In throwing the party and giving him the ring and robe, the dad was saying, "All is forgiven. Consider it over and done with. I don't see your mistake, I see you. Now let's enjoy the party." Now it's important to know that there were 2 groups of people who were listening to this story when Jesus told it. There were the sinners, the people who had questionable reputations, and then the religious people, the good crowd who followed all the rules, or so they thought. For the sinners in the crowd, this message was unlike anything they'd ever heard. no punishment for his mistakes, no relational or physical distance between the Father and the Son. That sounds incredible. But for the religious leaders, this didn't sound so great. I mean, wouldn't this make the Father look bad? Wouldn't it be encouraging more bad behavior from the Son later on? There should be distance between the Father and the Son. The Son messed up and someone needed to pay. But Jesus wasn't done with the story. He talked about the older brother who heard there was a party being thrown for his rebellious little brother. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. You never gave me a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you killed the fattened calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." So, the father enjoyed the party, the younger son enjoyed the party, and the older son? We never find out what happens. Did he go to the party? Did he welcome his brother back? Or did he keep his distance? We don't know. But would anyone really blame him if he took a pass and skipped the party? I mean, he did everything right. Why did the rebellious son get the royal treatment from dad? But see, that's what makes the story one that people are unlikely to forget. See, Jesus was looking at his audience, the sinners and the religious leaders, and he knew that they both agreed that the younger son should have to pay for his bad behavior and the older son should be rewarded for his good behavior. But instead, they got something totally different. A younger brother who didn't fix anything in his life before the party, and an older brother who didn't like it. A younger brother who was placed in the family again, and an older brother who was so mad that he risked missing the party completely. See, in this parable, the great storyteller was making a point to the people who were unsure if they were qualified to follow him because of their mistakes. To them, the story said, "You don't have to be fixed to be found." And to the religious leaders who were frustrated and angry because Jesus seemed too soft on sin, the story said, "Careful, you don't get to decide how fixed someone has to be before they are found." The incredible thing about this story is that this message still matters today. For people who think they've gone too far, messed up too much, done too many bad things, Jesus is saying, "I'll never give up on you." And for the people who are making good decisions and doing the right things, Jesus says, "Don't ever give up on someone else." The question today is, who are you in the story? If you can consider yourself one of the good kids, like the older brother in the story, I want you to think for a moment about people who you believe need to be fixed before they find a place here. Ask yourself, if Jesus doesn't think they need to be fixed to be found, why do I? Think of one or two of your lost friends and start praying for them, hanging out with them in safe places like at your house or out for coffee, playing ball at the rec center. Start intentionally being a great friend to a person who needs more Jesus in his or her life. And being a friend to them as they are now, you're representing the heart of Jesus. And for others of you, you may feel like the younger son. You feel like you've disqualified yourself from church and Jesus' love. And you figure that there's a whole lot of things you need to get right before Jesus will be good with you. But here's the good news. Jesus always has open arms for someone like you. You may have lost your way, but you haven't lost your worth. Whatever your past, whatever your struggle, Jesus is ready for you. Take a step in his direction. Believe what he says about you is true. That he isn't waiting for you to change in order to love and accept you. You're already found. Remember, you don't have to be fixed to be found. The son who came home was still a mess. You might still be a mess. Your friend may be a mess. But people can come home messy. The Father is the one who will receive you, redeem you, and restore you. You may lose your way, but you'll never lose your value. You can go to God just as you are, and you can help others do the same thing.